Chosen one, have you ever woken up at 3 a.m. with your heart pounding and wondered why? Have you ever felt invisible eyes tracking your every move, watching from somewhere you can't see? Have you ever sensed that the silence around you wasn't empty, but loaded? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. God waited exactly 2 hours before he sent this warning to you. 2 hours, not 1, not 3, exactly 2. And during those 2 hours of divine silence, someone was watching you, recording you, taking notes on your life like a detective building a case. I know that sounds impossible. I know your logical mind is already pushing back. But somewhere deeper in that place where your spirit lives, you know I'm telling you the truth. Because you've felt it, haven't you? That strange weight in the air. That sensation of being observed by something you cannot name. Why 2 hours? Why now? Why you? You see, in heaven's economy, time doesn't move the way it does down here in Brooklyn, in Queens, in the Bronx. 2 hours in the spiritual realm can be 2 lifetimes on earth. And when the Almighty pauses the clock, when he holds his breath for exactly 120 minutes before he moves, beloved, that's not delay. That's divine strategy. He's watching to see what you'll do when you think he's silent. But here's what breaks my heart, and this is going to shake you to your core. During those 2 hours of silence, an investigator was assigned to your case. Not from heaven, from somewhere else. Someone was cataloging your weaknesses, documenting your fears, building a file on every moment you almost gave up. And then they got caught. I'm talking to those of you who've lived 70, 80, 90 years on this earth. You didn't make it this far by accident. You've survived too much, endured too long, weathered too many storms to believe in coincidence anymore. You know when the air changes. You know when something invisible walks into the room and sits down beside you. Before we go deeper into this mystery, before I reveal exactly who was watching you and what they were looking for, I want to pause and thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just giving, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here. Your support, your time, your attention, it all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let the Spirit lead your heart. But right now, if your spirit already feels a tug, if something in your chest is confirming that this message found you for a reason, drop "I'm listening" in the comments. That's not just a comment. That's a signal. A declaration to heaven that you're spiritually awake right now. Stay with me, because what I'm about to reveal about who was watching you and why they got caught will explain everything strange that's been happening in your life. The 2-hour silence is over. It's time to tell you everything. Why has God been silent in your life lately? Why does it feel like your prayers are hitting a ceiling and bouncing back? Why after 70, 80, 90 years of walking with Him, does heaven suddenly feel distant? Listen to me, beloved. What you're experiencing right now isn't abandonment, it's examination. You see, there's something happening in the spiritual realm that most preachers won't tell you about. Something ancient, something powerful, something that explains why the breakthroughs you've been begging for haven't arrived yet. Even though you've been faithful, even though you've tithed, even though you've prayed until your knees ached and your voice went hoarse. Heaven has paused your timeline, not to punish you, to protect you. Think about this for a moment. When a seasoned jazz musician walks onto that stage in Harlem, when he lifts that saxophone to his lips, there's always a pause before the crescendo. That silence before the solo, that's not confusion, beloved. That's mastery. That pause is where the power builds. That silence is where the soul of the music lives. God is a master musician, and right now, He's holding His breath over your life. But here's what's going to shake you to your core. The warning God is giving you today was delayed on purpose. Exactly 2 hours. Because during those 20 minutes of divine silence, an investigator in the spiritual realm was assigned to watch you. And that investigator got caught. I'm going to reveal who that investigator is in just a moment. But first, you need to understand something that will change how you see every season of waiting you've ever endured. When God goes silent, He's not ignoring you. He's investigating the atmosphere around you. Think about when you visit the doctor. What's the first thing they do? They tell you to be quiet. Don't talk. Let me listen. And then they press that cold stethoscope against your chest and they listen. They're not being cruel. They're not abandoning you. That silence is the examination. They're listening for what's hidden beneath the surface. The rhythm of your heart, the flow of your blood, the whisper of your breath. God does the same thing. Psalm 4:6 senses, "Be still and know that I am God." That word, still, in Hebrew is rapha. It means to let go, to surrender, to stop striving. When heaven goes quiet, God is listening to the rhythm of your spirit. He's checking your spiritual pulse. He's examining what you do when you think He's not watching. And beloved, you passed the test. You're still here. You're still believing. You're still fighting. But during those 2 hours of silence, something else was happening. While God was listening to you, someone else was watching you, documenting every moment of doubt, recording every second of weakness, building a case against your destiny. Job understood this mystery. The Bible says in Job 1:6, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them." Satan wasn't there by accident. He was there as an investigator, an accuser. The Hebrew word is hasatan, literally the accuser, or the adversary. He was building a case, presenting evidence, trying to convince God that Job wasn't really faithful. He was just spoiled by blessing. You know what God did? He didn't reject Satan's request to investigate. He allowed it. He permitted the examination. Not because he doubted Job, but because he wanted to prove what was really inside Job's heart. The same thing is happening to you right now. For 2 hours in heaven's timeline that could be 2 years on earth, 2 decades, 2 moments, God stepped back. Not because He stopped caring, because He wanted to see what you're made of when the hedge of protection seems to come down. He wanted to watch you choose faith when feelings failed. He wanted to witness you worship in the wilderness. And here's what the enemy didn't count on. You kept going. You didn't quit. You didn't curse God. You didn't walk away. But that investigator, that spiritual adversary who was documenting your life, cataloging your struggles, building a file against your future, he made a fatal mistake. He got so close to you, so obsessed with finding evidence of your failure, that he crossed a line. And heaven caught him. Think about this. Why would the enemy waste resources investigating someone insignificant? Why would darkness assign a high-ranking investigator to track someone ordinary? The very fact that you've been under this level of spiritual surveillance is proof that you're carrying something hell is terrified of. You're not being attacked because you're weak. You're being investigated because you're dangerous. Revelation 10:10 calls Satan the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, constantly, building cases, presenting evidence, trying to disqualify the chosen. But that same verse ends with these words, "They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony." You're about to discover what happens when an investigator from hell gets caught by the courts of heaven. You're about to understand why God's silence in your life wasn't absence, it was strategy. You're about to learn what heaven does when the accuser overplays his hand. Chosen one, if you've ever felt God's silence before a breakthrough, if you've ever wondered why the answer took so long, like this video right now so more people like you can hear what heaven is whispering, Because what I'm about to reveal next will expose the identity of your investigator and why his assignment against you just got terminated. You want to know why your life has felt like a surveillance operation, why you can't shake the feeling that someone's been taking notes on every move you make, every decision you face, every moment you thought you were alone. Let me tell you something that's going to rearrange everything you thought you knew about the invisible world. There are investigators in the spiritual realm, right now, recording, watching, documenting. And I'm not talking about some far-off theological concept that doesn't touch your real life. I'm talking about actual assignments being carried out over your kitchen table, in your bedroom at 2 a.m., during that doctor's visit that terrified you last month. The Bible pulls back the curtain on this reality in Daniel chapter 4, verse 2-10. It says, "The decision is announced by messengers, the holy ones declare the verdict." Messengers, watchers, angels assigned to observe and record. But here's what most preachers won't tell you: they're not the only ones watching. You see, heaven keeps records. Malachi 2:56 tells us, "A scroll of remembrance was written in his presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored his name. Every act of obedience when you thought nobody noticed, every tear you cried in secret, every time you chose faith when logic screamed at you to give up. Recorded, documented, treasured." But the enemy, he's been taking notes too. Think about it like this. When the FBI wants to build a case against someone, what do? They don't arrest them immediately. No, they assign an investigator, someone who shadows them, tracks their patterns, studies their weaknesses, waits for the perfect moment to strike. The suspect doesn't even know they're being watched until the handcuffs click. That's exactly what's been happening to you in the spiritual realm. The enemy has assigned investigators to the chosen ones, not to everyone, not to the casual believers who show up to church twice a year and never threaten his kingdom. No, beloved, he reserves his most skilled operatives for people like you, people who carry something dangerous, people whose prayers shake the foundations of hell, people whose very existence threatens the darkness. You thought your struggles were random. You thought that betrayal came out of nowhere. You thought your health crisis, your financial collapse, your family falling apart was just bad luck. Wake up. Someone was studying you, learning your triggers, mapping your vulnerabilities, building a profile on how to destroy you before you stepped into your full calling. Job chapter 1 verse 7. God asks Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answers, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it, back and forth." Roaming, watching, investigating, looking for targets. But here's what the enemy didn't count on. Here's where his arrogance became his downfall. These investigators, whether they're human operatives who've been placed in your life or demonic spirits assigned to track you, they operate in the shadows. They rely on secrecy. They depend on you never realizing you're being watched. Because if you woke up to the reality of the surveillance, you'd start moving differently. You'd start praying strategically. You'd stop being a passive target and become an active warrior. And that's exactly what's happening right now. You're sitting there listening to these words, and something in your chest is confirming what I'm saying. That paranoia you felt, that wasn't mental illness. That was spiritual discernment. Your spirit was picking up on the surveillance before your mind could name it. Think about your life over the past 6 months. How many times have you felt watched? How many times have you sensed that your conversations weren't private, that your thoughts weren't your own, that something invisible was cataloging your every weakness? You weren't imagining it. But here's where it gets shocking. Here's where the whole operation falls apart for the enemy. This investigator assigned to you made a fatal mistake. And that's how God exposed him to save you. See, the enemy is smart, but he's not omniscient. He can plan, but he can't see everything. He can study you, but he doesn't know what God knows. And in his arrogance, in his certainty that he had you figured out, this investigator got sloppy. He revealed himself at exactly the wrong moment, or from heaven's perspective, exactly the right one. God let him watch you for 2 hours. Exactly 2 hours. Long enough for the investigator to think he had the upper hand. Long enough for him to build his case, gather his evidence, prepare his assault. But not long enough to execute it. Because, beloved, you've been targeted because you're chosen, not because you're weak. The enemy doesn't waste his best investigators on irrelevant people. He doesn't assign surveillance teams to folks who pose no threat to his kingdom. The fact that you've been under this level of spiritual scrutiny is proof, undeniable proof, that you carry something he desperately wants to stop. Your prayers matter. Your obedience threatens him. Your awakening terrifies him. And now that you know you've been watched, everything changes. But the question burning in your spirit right now is this: what was the investigator looking for? What did he think he found? And how exactly did God catch him in the act? You want to know what really happened during those 2 hours of silence. Let me take you behind the veil. Let me show you what was happening in the realm you cannot see with natural eyes. While you were sitting in your kitchen at 2 a.m., staring at that cup of coffee going cold, wondering if God had forgotten your address, heaven was holding its breath. Every angel in your assignment was standing at attention. The Father himself was leaning forward on his throne watching. Not because he didn't know what you'd do, but because he needed a record. He needed witnesses. You see, dear one, there's something they don't teach you in Sunday school. There's something most preachers won't tell you because it sounds too mystical, too otherworldly. But you've lived long enough to know that the spiritual realm is more real than the chair you're sitting in right now. During those 2 hours you were being recorded. Not by security cameras, not by the government, by angels assigned to document your response to divine silence. Every choice you made was being written down. Every time you wanted to give up but didn't, recorded. Every moment you chose faith over fear, documented. Every tear that fell from your eyes collected in golden bowls before the throne of God. Revelation 15 tells us about golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's holy people. But what they don't tell you is that those bowls don't just hold prayers, they hold records, evidence, proof that you passed the test when you didn't even know you were being tested. Why does God test in silence? Because faith that cannot be tested cannot be trusted. Think about Job. God allowed Satan to strip everything from him, his wealth, his children, his health. And then came the worst part, the silence. Job's friends showed up with their religious speeches, but God said nothing. For 37 chapters, Job cried out, demanded answers, questioned everything, and heaven was silent. But here's what Job didn't know while he was sitting in the ashes, scraping his boils with broken pottery. There was a courtroom session happening in the unseen realm. Satan had demanded access to Job's life, and God granted it, not because Job deserved punishment, but because Job was about to become evidence. Proof that a human being could love God even when God seemed absent. You are Job in this generation. Those 2 hours weren't abandonment. They were your courtroom moment. Your character was being established as evidence. And beloved, you passed. Because you're still here, you're still listening, you're still believing even when belief hurts. But during those same 2 hours, something else was happening. Something darker. Something you need to understand right now. An investigator was dispatched from the enemy's camp. Not a demon, something more sophisticated. Something that operates like a spiritual detective, gathering intelligence, building cases, looking for legal access to derail your destiny. The Bible calls them accusers, principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places. Ephesians 6:6 warns us, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." This investigator had one assignment: access your file, your future, your next blessing, your divine assignment. Find out what God was about to release in your life and stop it before it manifested. And beloved, he almost succeeded. Think about Daniel. For 21 days he prayed and fasted, but heaven was silent. Daniel 33 reveals what was really happening. The prince of the Persian kingdom resisted me 21 days. Then Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. An enemy prince was blocking Daniel's breakthrough. But the moment God said, "Enough," the demonic investigator was overpowered. During your 2 hours, the same thing happened. The investigator approached the gates of your destiny. He demanded access. He quoted your past mistakes like legal precedent. He pulled out every failure, every doubt, every moment of weakness. He built his case before the courts of heaven, arguing why you should be disqualified, why your blessing should be revoked, why your calling should be cancelled. But then something magnificent happened. Something that should make you fall to your knees right now in gratitude. God blocked him. The Almighty stood up, and when God stands up, beloved, everything else sits down. He looked at that investigator and said one word: denied. Not because you're perfect, not because you never failed, but because during those 2 hours of silence, you proved something. You proved that even when you couldn't feel him, you still trusted him. Even when you couldn't hear him, you still obeyed him. Even when it looked like he'd forgotten you, you refused to forget him. Your patience became your weapon. Your endurance became your evidence. Your refusal to quit became the legal grounds for God to slam the door in the enemy's face. Job 23:10 declares, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." You weren't being refined for decoration, dear one. You were being refined for documentation. So that when the accuser showed up with his lies, God could point to the record and say, "Look at what they did in the darkness. Look at how they worshipped when no one was watching. Look at how they kept believing when I kept silent." Someone tried to access information about your future, your assignment, your next blessing. They wanted to know what God was preparing so they could prepare a counterstrike. But heaven caught them, blocked them, removed them from the equation. And now, right now, the 2-hour silence is over. The test is complete. The investigator has been expelled. And what God was protecting during those 20 minutes of divine delay is about to be released into your life with such force that everyone who counted you out will have to count you in. Chosen ones, if you've ever endured a silent test, if you've ever held on when letting go would have been easier, write, "I stayed," in the comments. Let heaven see that you recognize what just happened. Let the enemy know his investigation failed. Because what's coming next will require you to understand something even more shocking. Why the investigator targeted you specifically, and what he discovered about your assignment that made him desperate enough to risk getting caught. Now listen to me very carefully, chosen one. What I'm about to tell you will make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Because the investigator who was watching you during those 2 hours wasn't human. At least, not entirely. You see, the enemy doesn't operate the way you think he does. He doesn't always show up with horns and a pitchfork. Sometimes he sends someone you know. Sometimes he uses a face you trust. Sometimes he disguises his agents as friends, as family members, as people who claim to love you, but whose spirits reek of jealousy every time God blesses you. Think about it. Haven't you noticed how certain people only call you when they need something? How they smile to your face, but you can feel the coldness radiating from their hearts? How they ask questions that sound like concern, but feel like interrogation? How are you doing financially? Are you still taking all those medications? Must be hard being alone at your age. Those aren't innocent questions, beloved. Those are reconnaissance missions. Just like a thief checking every window of the house before he breaks in, someone has been circling your life, looking for an opening, looking for your weak spots, cataloging your fears, documenting your moments of doubt, building a case against your destiny. But here's what shakes me to my core. This investigator wasn't just flesh and blood. There was something darker behind those eyes, something ancient, something that's been tracking your bloodline for generations. The Bible warns us about this in Ephesians 6:2. Paul didn't sugarcoat it, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. You thought you were fighting against difficult people, but those people were just puppets. There was an investigator pulling the strings, a spiritual adversary assigned specifically to you, studying your patterns, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And for 2 hours, God let him watch. For 120 minutes, heaven held its breath while this investigator compiled his report. Why? Because the Almighty was building his own case. He was gathering evidence. He was setting a trap. You know what your problem has been all these years? You've been too nice, too forgiving, too willing to let people back into your life who've proven they don't belong there. That cousin who only shows up when someone dies. That old friend who vanishes when you're struggling but reappears when you're blessed. That church member who smiles on Sunday but gossips about you on Monday. Listen to what Jesus said in Matthew 3:6. A man's foes shall be they of his own household, not might be, shall be. That's a guarantee. The people closest to you, the ones who know your routines, your weaknesses, your breaking points, those are the ones the enemy recruits first. But here's where it gets dangerous. Sometimes the investigator isn't even a person. Sometimes it's a generational stronghold that's been watching your family for decades. That spirit of poverty that followed your grandmother, stalked your mother, and now whispers in your ear that you'll never have enough. That familiar spirit of depression that convinced your father to give up and now sits in your living room at 4 a.m. telling you the same lies. That's not mental illness, dear one. That's a demonic watcher assigned to derail your timeline. I'm 73 years old, and I've seen this pattern repeat itself in family after family across the Bronx, across Harlem, across every neighborhood in this city. The same spirits, the same strategies, the same investigations running on repeat, generation after generation, until somebody finally wakes up and says, "No more. Not on my watch." Is that you? Are you the one who's finally going to break the cycle? Because here's what the investigator didn't count on. Here's what he didn't see coming. While he was busy watching you, heaven was watching him. While he was documenting your weaknesses, the Almighty was exposing his assignment. While he was building his case against you, God was building his case against him. And then, exactly 2 hours into the investigation, heaven slammed the door on his face. You want to know what happened? Job 5:2 tells you, "He disappointeth the devices of the crafty, so that their hands cannot perform their enterprise." The investigator's assignment failed. His report got rejected. His access got revoked. He got caught red-handed trying to destroy what God had already declared blessed. And that is why God waited 2 hours. He wasn't late. He wasn't slow. He wasn't ignoring your cries for help. He was catching the one investigating you. He was setting up the ultimate sting operation. He was letting the enemy reveal his hand so heaven could cut it off permanently. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, that investigator's assignment over your life has been terminated. The access he had, revoked. The information he gathered, inadmissible. The plans he made, cancelled by divine decree. But beloved, here's the question that's going to determine everything that happens next. Now that the investigator has been caught and removed, what are you going to do with your freedom? You want to know why your life has been harder than everyone else's. Why you've carried burdens that would have crushed weaker souls. Why every step forward seemed to cost you 3 steps back. Listen to me, beloved. What happened to you wasn't random. You were targeted. Not by chance, not by bad luck, not because God was angry with you. You were specifically, strategically, deliberately targeted because hell saw what heaven hid inside you. And that investigator I mentioned, the one who got caught watching you during those 2 hours, he wasn't there by accident. He was assigned to your case because you carry something the kingdom of darkness fears. Think about your life for a moment. Really think about it. How many times have you sat at your kitchen table at 2 a.m., tears streaming down your weathered face, wondering if anyone even remembered your name? How many nights have you lain in that empty bed, reaching across to a side that's been cold for years, whispering prayers into darkness that felt like stone? You've buried people you never thought you'd have to bury. You've watched dreams die that you prayed over for decades. You've seen your children make choices that broke your heart into pieces, so small you didn't think it could ever be whole again. You've counted pennies when you used to count blessings. You've taken pills for pain that has no name on any medical chart. And through it all, you've asked the same question 1,000 times. God, why me? Here's the answer that's going to shatter everything you thought you knew about your suffering. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. Every tear you cried in that bathroom where nobody could hear you, that was liquid gold being refined. Every betrayal that left you gasping for air, that was pressure creating a diamond. Every financial collapse, every health scare, every moment you wanted to quit but didn't, that was the fire that doesn't destroy, it purifies. Malachi 3:3 says it plainly. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the Levites and refine them like gold and silver. But here's what they don't tell you in Sunday school. The refiner doesn't just throw silver in the fire and walk away. No. He sits, he watches, he waits, and he only removes the silver when he can see his own reflection in it. God has been sitting beside your fire for 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, watching, waiting. And now, right now, he can finally see his reflection in you. But that investigator, he was watching for something else. He was documenting every moment you almost broke, every second you almost gave up, every night you almost walked away from faith. He was building a case against you in the courts of darkness, compiling evidence that you weren't strong enough, faithful enough, worthy enough to carry what God wants to give you next. Let me tell you about Job. The Bible says in Job 1:8 that God himself pointed Job out to Satan. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And what happened next? Everything was stripped away. His wealth, his children, his health, his wife's support. The enemy thought he was destroying Job, but God knew something Satan didn't. He knew that what Job carried inside couldn't be touched by external loss. That's you, chosen one. That's your story. Every attack you've endured wasn't proof that God abandoned you. It was proof that you carry something so valuable, so dangerous to the kingdom of darkness, that hell had to mobilize its best weapons against you. The devil doesn't waste ammunition on empty vessels. He doesn't send investigators to document the lives of people who pose no threat. But you've been in his crosshairs since the day you were born. That loneliness you've felt for decades, it wasn't isolation. It was incubation. God was separating you from voices that would have contaminated what he was building inside you. That betrayal from people you trusted most, it wasn't rejection. It was redirection. Heaven was removing everyone who would have held you back from your true assignment. And those prayers, oh beloved, those prayers that felt like they bounced off the ceiling and landed back in your lap unanswered. Every single one was heard. Every single one was recorded. Revelation 15 tells us that the prayers of the saints are kept in golden bowls before the throne of God. Your prayers didn't disappear. They've been accumulating, compounding, building interest in heaven's economy. But here's what's going to blow your mind. Here's the part that explains everything. The blessing that's coming to you next requires spiritual clearance. Not everyone can handle what God wants to release into your life. Not everyone has the character, the endurance, the tested faith to steward the level of anointing, favor, and provision that's about to be poured out. The fire you walked through was your background check. The trials you endured were your security clearance. The years you spent feeling forgotten were actually years of divine vetting. And that investigator who was watching you, he just got caught. His assignment is over. His access to your life has been revoked. Because God looked at the evidence, not the enemy's evidence against you, but his own evidence of your faithfulness, and he declared, cleared, approved, qualified. 1 Peter 1:7 promises that these trials will show that your faith is genuine. It is being tested as fire tests and purifies gold, though your faith is far more precious than mere gold. Your faith survived the fire. That means you're more valuable now than when you went in. The diamond that spent a lifetime under crushing pressure is finally being brought to the surface. And when the world sees what God has been forming in the depths of your suffering, they won't believe their eyes. Because the blessing coming next isn't just for you. It's for everyone who's been watching your life, wondering if faith still works in the 21st century. You're about to become living proof that God keeps his promises, even when the wait feels eternal. God just cleared your name. The investigation is over. The evidence is in your favor. If you believe that, if something in your spirit is confirming that your season of testing is finished and your season of testimony is beginning, type, I'm cleared in the comments right now. That's not just a statement, that's a declaration. That's you agreeing with what heaven has already spoken over your life. But the question that will determine everything is this. Now that you're cleared, are you ready to receive what all that fire was preparing you for? You want to know what happened in those 2 hours. Let me paint you a picture that will make your spine tingle. While you were going about your day, maybe sitting in your kitchen with your morning coffee, maybe staring out the window wondering if God still remembered your name, something was happening in the unseen realm. Something so dramatic, so explosive, that if you could have seen it with your natural eyes, you would have fallen to your knees right there. Heaven's courtroom convened. Now I need you to understand something. When I say courtroom, I'm not talking about some earthly judge in a black robe shuffling papers. I'm talking about the Supreme Court of the universe, the place where angels stand at attention, where the air crackles with holiness, where verdicts are handed down that shift entire bloodlines. And you, yes, you sitting there right now, you are the subject of the case. Psalm 23:20 tells us about his angels mighty in strength who do his word, obeying the voice of his word. These aren't chubby cherubs with harps, beloved, these are warriors, mighty ones. And on this particular day, they had a mission: to surround an unauthorized observer who had been tracking your life without divine clearance. Picture this. You know how in the old war movies, when the enemy spy gets caught behind our lines and suddenly he's surrounded by American soldiers with their weapons drawn. That's what happened in the spirit realm. This investigator, this agent of darkness who'd been building a file on you, documenting every moment of weakness, cataloging every tear you cried when you thought nobody was watching, he got caught red-handed. But here's what's going to shake you. He wasn't just casually observing, he was preparing, strategizing, building a case against your breakthrough. He'd been watching you for weeks, maybe months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. waiting for you to give up, waiting for you to quit, waiting for you to believe the lie that your best days are behind you. The enemy doesn't waste surveillance on nobodies. He doesn't deploy investigators to track people who pose no threat to his kingdom. Let that sink in for a moment. The very fact that you were being watched, that someone from the kingdom of darkness considered you important enough to investigate, that's not a curse. Beloved, that's confirmation. You carry something they fear. You possess something they cannot steal. You are marked for a destiny so significant that hell itself had to assign a specialist to try to stop you. But God saw it all. Job 3:4 declares, "For his eyes are on the ways of man, and he sees all his steps." Nothing happens in the spirit realm without the Almighty's knowledge. And when this investigator crossed the line, when he overstepped his bounds and tried to interfere with your divine timeline without permission, heaven moved. Angels surrounded him like a military operation, not to negotiate, not to discuss, to apprehend, to expose, to restrain. Can you imagine the scene? This demonic agent who thought he was operating in secret, who believed his surveillance was undetected, suddenly finding himself encircled by the armies of the living God. The shock, the terror, the realization that he'd been caught by something far more powerful than he ever imagined. But God didn't just stop him. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. God didn't just interrupt his mission and send him away with a warning. No, the Almighty did something far more strategic, far more devastating to the kingdom of darkness. He exposed him. He pulled back the veil and revealed to all of heaven and hell exactly what this investigator had been doing. Every secret plan, every whispered strategy, every scheme designed to make you give up, all of it laid bare in the courts of heaven. Then God marked him. Like a criminal getting his fingerprints taken, like a trespasser getting banned from the property, this demonic investigator was marked, tagged, identified so that every angel, every heavenly being, every warrior in God's army would recognize him if he ever came near you again. And then this is the part that should make you shout right where you're sitting. God restrained him, bound him, limited his access, put spiritual restraining orders in place that said, "You will not touch this one. You will not interfere with this timeline. You will not sabotage this destiny." Why? Because you matter more than you know. Because your latter days are going to be greater than your former days. Because God has invested too much in your survival to let some unauthorized agent derail what he's been building in secret. Revelation 10:2 says, "The accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. Not negotiated with, not reasoned with, cast down with force and finality." And here's the prophetic word that's burning in my spirit right now, and you need to catch this with everything in you. From this day forward, anyone who tries to investigate your life without God's permission will be caught the same way. Any demon assigned to track you, any spiritual force deployed to monitor your movements, any agent of darkness who dares to build a case against your breakthrough, they will meet the same fate as this investigator. They will be surrounded, they will be exposed, they will be marked, they will be restrained. You are under divine protection now, not because you're perfect, but because you're chosen, not because you've earned it, but because heaven has declared it. But here's the question that should be burning in your mind right now. If the enemy considered you dangerous enough to investigate, what exactly does he see in your future that terrifies him so much? Listen to me, chosen one. Everything is about to change. You thought the 2-hour silence was God forgetting you. You thought the investigator watching your life meant you were under attack. But what if I told you that everything that's happened to you in the last decade wasn't punishment? It was preparation. What if the delays weren't denials? What if they were divine classrooms? Think about it. How many doors slammed shut when you were certain they should have opened? How many opportunities dissolved right when you reached for them? How many times did you pray, "God, why not now?" only to hear, "Silence, 2 hours of it, 2 years of it, maybe even 20 years of it." But here's what the enemy didn't want you to know. Here's what that investigator was desperately trying to hide from heaven's record. Every single delay was building something inside you that instant success never could. Every closed door was protecting you from what would have destroyed you. Every moment of silence was God positioning you for something so massive that if it had come any sooner, you wouldn't have been ready to handle it. Romans 2:18 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose." All things, not some things, not the easy things, all things, even the 2-hour silence, even the investigator, even the pain. You see, beloved, delays in God's kingdom aren't punishments. They're preparations. While you've been waiting, feeling forgotten, wondering if your best years are behind you, God has been assembling something in the invisible realm. Angels have been taking their positions. Divine doors have been unlocking. Supernatural favor has been accumulating with your name on it. The future you've been praying for, it's been preparing for you. But here's where it gets supernatural. Here's where everything shifts. When that investigator got caught, when heaven exposed the enemy's surveillance over your life, something changed in the spiritual atmosphere around you. A new protection was activated. A shield went up that wasn't there before. And right now, as I speak these words, angels are standing guard over your next season. Not the angels who've been with you before. New ones, specialized ones. Warriors assigned specifically to protect what God is about to release into your life. Psalm 1 declares, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways." But do you know what that really means? It means that when you step into this new season, this protected assignment, you don't walk alone anymore. You don't fight alone anymore. You don't even breathe alone anymore. Heaven has surrounded you with forces the natural eye cannot see. But you have to learn how to walk in this protection. You have to understand how to move in this new season. Because the rules have changed. The old way of operating won't work anymore. First, you need discernment. Not just spiritual discernment, but divine discernment. The ability to know who's speaking and why. Because here's what 70, 80, 90 years on this earth should have taught you. Not every voice that sounds good is from God. Not every open door is a divine door. Not every opportunity is an appointment. The investigator got caught because he was whispering lies that sounded like logic. You're too old. You've missed your chance. God's done with people your age. But discernment, real discernment. Here's the father of lies underneath the reasonable words. Second, you need stillness, not laziness, not giving up, but the kind of supernatural stillness that Psalm 4:6 talks about. Be still and know that I am God. In Hebrew, that word, still, means to let go, to release, to cease striving. You've been fighting battles that were never yours to fight. You've been carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. This new season requires you to stop trying to force doors open and start trusting God's timing. Third, you need to trust the pauses. Every time God goes silent, He's not abandoning you. He's positioning you. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him from a burning bush. Joseph sat in prison for years before Pharaoh summoned him to the palace. Even Jesus disappeared for 18 years between the temple at 12 and the Jordan River at 30. The pauses aren't empty spaces. They're loaded silences. And fourth, listen carefully to this one: you need to avoid the wrong voices. In this new season, not everyone who claims to love you actually wants to see you blessed. Not everyone who calls themselves your friend can handle your elevation. Not everyone who's been in your life for decades is supposed to walk with you into your next chapter. Proverbs 4:23 warns, "Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Guard your heart. Guard your ears. Guard your spirit. Because the enemy can't attack you directly anymore, the angels won't allow it. So he'll try to use familiar voices to plant doubt. But here's what I need you to understand with crystal clarity. Here's the revelation that changes everything. A new blessing is on the way. Right now, moving toward you like a freight train. And the most beautiful part, the enemy can no longer see it. When that investigator got caught, when heaven exposed his surveillance, God put a cloak over your next season. A spiritual covering so powerful that hell itself has lost visual contact. You've been hidden in plain sight, protected by divine camouflage, walking through a world that has no idea what you're carrying or where you're going. And before this video ends, I will tell you why you were chosen out of thousands to receive this warning. Why your name was called. Why this message found you at exactly this moment. But right now, if you feel the shift happening in your spirit, if you sense the angels taking their positions, if you know that something fundamental has changed in the atmosphere around your life, right, covered below, that's not just a word, that's a declaration, a spiritual seal over your new protected assignment. Because chosen one, the 2-hour silence is over. The investigator has been caught. And what comes next will leave both heaven and earth in awe of what God does through someone who refused to give up. But the question that will determine everything is this. Are you ready to step into a season you've never experienced before? Chosen one, we've journeyed together through the mystery of the 2-hour silence. We've uncovered the investigator who was tracking your every move. But now, right now, I need you to lean in close, because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about your life. God didn't warn you because you're in danger. He warned you because you've reached a spiritual rank you didn't even realize you'd achieved. Listen to me carefully. When heaven assigns an investigator to monitor someone, it's not random. The enemy doesn't waste resources on nobodies. He doesn't deploy surveillance on people who pose no threat to his kingdom. That investigator was watching you because hell recognized something about your future that you haven't seen yet. You think you're just another senior citizen living out your final years in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, in Staten Island. You think your best days are behind you. You think God's moved on to younger vessels, stronger bodies, sharper minds. But that's the lie the investigator was sent to reinforce. The truth, your next blessing is so high value that heaven had to intervene before the enemy could sabotage it. We're not talking about a little financial breakthrough. We're not talking about a small health improvement. We're talking about a spiritual promotion so massive that it required divine protection before it could manifest. Think about Daniel. When he was thrown into that lion's den, do you think those lions lost their appetite by accident? No. Daniel 6:22 says, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." God didn't remove Daniel from danger. He sent protection into the danger with him. Why? Because Daniel had reached a spiritual rank where his prayers were literally shifting kingdoms. The king himself declared, "He is the living God and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed." That's you right now. You've been praying for decades. You've been faithful when it made no sense. You've been standing when everyone else sat down. And now, right now, those prayers have accumulated so much power in the heavenly realm that God had to pause everything for 2 hours to make sure nothing could interrupt what he's about to release. But here's what will shake you to your core. Heaven needed to protect the next stage of your calling. Not your current stage, your next stage. You think you're living in your final chapter, but God is saying you're entering your finest chapter. Moses was 80 when the burning bush called his name. 80 years old. The world would put him in assisted living, but God put him in front of Pharaoh. Why? Because the assignment required someone who had spent 8 decades learning to hear God's voice above every other noise. Sarah was 90 when Isaac was conceived. 90. Her body had been dead for years, but Genesis 2:1 says, "The Lord did for Sarah what he had promised," not what seemed logical, not what made medical sense, what he promised. You are not simply being guarded, beloved. You are being promoted. And promotion in the kingdom doesn't look like promotion in the world. The world promotes based on youth, energy, and productivity. Heaven promotes based on faithfulness, endurance, and proven character. Every year you've lived, every storm you've survived, every night you cried yourself to sleep but woke up praising anyway, that's your resume in the courts of heaven. The investigator was building a case against you, documenting every moment of weakness, recording every doubt, cataloging every fear. He was preparing to present evidence to the accuser of the brethren, trying to convince heaven that you weren't ready, you weren't worthy. You couldn't handle what God wanted to give you. But then he got caught. Revelation 10:2 tells us about the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night. But that same verse says he has been hurled down, past tense, defeated, exposed, caught. And when that investigator was caught spying on you, heaven made a declaration, "Touch not my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm." That's Psalm 155. You didn't just survive the investigation, you passed it. And now the very evidence the enemy collected against you has become evidence for you. Every time you almost gave up but didn't, that's evidence of supernatural endurance. Every financial crisis you survived, that's proof you can steward abundance. Every relationship that betrayed you but didn't make you bitter, that's confirmation you carry a spirit of forgiveness this generation desperately needs. God waited 2 hours because heaven was making sure nothing and no one could touch the future he wrote with your name on it. Those 120 minutes weren't silence. They were preparation. Angels were being positioned. Demonic assignments were being cancelled. Doors were being unlocked. Resources were being redirected. People were being prepared to cross your path. Opportunities were being aligned with your arrival. The investigator was caught because your time has come. Not next year, not when you feel ready, not when circumstances look better, right now, this moment, this day, this hour. But here's what you need to understand. Knowing this truth isn't enough. You have to receive it. You have to speak it into existence. You have to declare it over your life with the same authority heaven just declared it over you. So right now, I need you to do something. If this word has touched the deepest part of your spirit, if something inside you is confirming that this message was sent specifically for you, I need you to type 3 words in the comments. I receive it. Not I hope for it, not I wish for it, I receive it. Because reception is an act of faith. It's you agreeing with heaven's verdict over the enemy's accusation. It's you accepting the promotion before you see the evidence. It's you walking in authority before the manifestation appears. And don't keep this to yourself. Share this video. Right now. Someone in your life, a friend, a family member, someone you haven't spoken to in years, they're being investigated too. And they need to know they're not paranoid, they're not imagining it, they're under surveillance because they're about to be promoted. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, ring that notification bell, because what I just shared with you isn't information, it's intelligence from the throne room. And there are more prophetic alerts coming that are meant specifically for your spirit. The 2-hour wait is over. The investigation is finished. The verdict is in. You are chosen. You are protected. You are promoted. Now walk like it.